Thanks for tuning in to Becoming Something, where we promise to keep the conversation honest and real for young adults in their 20s and 30s. Every moment we live is training for a future moment, and that's why we do this podcast, because we want you to be prepared for everything that life is going to throw at you. Our hope with this podcast is that it would help you become all that God desires you to be. So with that in mind, let's jump right in to this week's episode of Becoming Something.
What's up, podcast world? It's your boy JP in the podcast studio. Did you just come from the Barbie movie?
Oh my word.
No,
that's
my new book cover is pink, so I'm in my pink era.
Let's go.
Barbie stole it from me, actually.
My pink era. When was your pink era?
I think I'm about to head into it.
That high-pitched voice is Nate Hilgenkamp, also in the studio.
Man, since I'm a Christian, I've not seen the Barbie movie yet. So
I actually haven't either.
Oh, really?
No, yeah.
No
I
way.
got into like a debate with a friend because I was like, I heard it was a little, I don't know. Like there were some subliminal messages in there that were not good.
Like tear down the patriarchy.
Yeah. But I don't know. I didn't watch it, so.
Yeah.
You heard it here first. Maddie says that's a bad.
I'm not saying it's bad.
Just kidding. I'm just. Hey,
Sometimes
that was
I
a
just,
joke.
debate to
that
debate.
was a joke, guys. Because the online community, man, they are fierce about that.
My wife went with our life group girls. They all went together. So that's what's happening at your church.
Good.
So you got to get
under your leadership.
This is your church, man.
Speaking of tear down the patriarchy,
Your
this
wife,
is your church.
Nate.
I'm just like, I don't know. JP must be okay with this. This is what's
But if
happening in
Adelie
his life
watches
groups.
it, then obviously it's holy.
Yeah, she said it was funny. So she's like, I knew what I was walking
I've
into.
heard like super mixed reviews. I've heard like the caution's been overstated. I think it's like the downside is it targets children, and it's probably fine for adults that are like nostalgic.
Yeah. I think they could have made it more intense.
Yeah.
In the worldly way.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I think that's true. I think that's true. It's kind of a gray issue though.
You know, I almost lived like on like 10th Avenue one time, but it was like
See, mine was better.
Yeah, it was
mine was better.
That's better.
Why didn't you just jump on mine? You felt like you had to make your
don't
own.
know.
I
it's
know
like,
why.
he
He
could've
got
one up
insecure.
that.
He was like, I got to do better. Oh,
Hey.
gosh.
We have Mike on from 10th Avenue North, and wrote a book, Grace in the Gray. Mike, how you doing?
Oh, I'm doing just lovely. I feel like I need to go change into some pink.
Yeah. No, you got the wheat coffee hat. No, you don't need to change anything. You look
That's
great.
right, bro.
That's.
Representing my
Tell me
hood.
about the picture behind you.
It's a mural that my wife and my children and I did. We have a friend. She used to be the art director at Wheaton College, and she projects the image on a wall, and she teaches you how to paint it,
Wow.
and then
That's dope.
get it framed. And so we did it. It was
Man, that's a
awesome.
smart way to do that. They don't, like that, like all of like the painting with a twist or whatever those places are, where you like go on a date and paint with a glass of wine or
Did
whatever.
you do that with Monica?
We've done it, yeah.
But
I
you
feel
like
like
to paint.
But I feel like projecting it on a wall is
Yeah,
a
that's
way
smart.
like a much better thing.
Yeah. Did you say wine?
Yeah.
We're gonna have to edit that out.
No, we have several episodes actually on that. Go back and listen to them. So say your last name. Donehey.
Donehey.
Okay, that's way different.
Butchered it. Absolutely butchered it.
I saw it.
You speak English?
Well,
normally, or-
Donehey's usually spelled different, so I thought maybe it's French. I see the painting.
You
I
gave
see
like
the
an
painting behind
accent
you.
on it.
It looks like two words. Donehey. That's
Oh
such a
my
thing you would
gosh.
do.
That's how I tell people. I tell them that.
Do you really?
Yeah, done. I'm like, yeah, it's the word done and hey.
Yeah, done makes more sense than don't.
Yeah. That's
So-
amazing.
Oh man, tell me about this book, Grace in the Gray. It's out, man. Pick it up, guys. Everywhere books are sold. If you like this podcast, so don't pick it up yet. But in 15 minutes, make the decision whether you want to buy it or not.
Gosh.
So
No pressure, yeah.
Yeah, being in a CCM band for so many years, you're constantly put in this position. Number one, you experience a lot of disagreement because I get the unique perspective of playing in probably over 1,000 different churches over 20 years, and just about every denomination that exists, at least in the Protestant world. I mean, Catholic, Greek Orthodox, anything you can imagine. And so I get to be privy to a lot of discussions on theology and whatnot. And then when someone is a fan of your music, I found that they assume that you agree with them
Yeah.
on
Yeah,
every
that's
issue.
well said.
And when you say something, particularly on social
Yeah.
media or from stage, and it contradicts what they
Yeah.
think, they are mightily
All of a sudden, they're
shattered.
not fans anymore.
No, yeah. I mean, I had people walk out of
Oh,
concerts.
that line is
Wow.
so thin. I literally woke up thinking about this morning, just about how people will put you on an imaginary pedestal until you just. I mean, the switch will flip so fast. If you say something that they disagree with, and now all of a sudden you are the enemy. Like, you went from an object of worship to the enemy. So, and both of them are wrong, by the way. They're both sinful places to put people.
But what would that be that would be so bad that people are walking out? Like, what are you saying?
Oh, I said something about.
Jesus not being God.
I think it was something about.
No, I'm kidding. Jesus is God. That's not true.
But see, that's the point that I make in the book, is that in Christian culture, you have a belief system that is set up on the thing you believe determines your eternal destiny. Okay? So therefore, we put a lot of emphasis on thinking the right things, because we ultimately would believe that determines what happens to us for all eternity. And so what we are not sort of sensitive to is that, that might bleed over into areas that actually aren't essential. Like I love giving people a quiz on really hot button theological issues and go, okay, now why don't you think it's interesting that wasn't in the Nicene Creed or the Apostles' Creed? Like, why wasn't that considered essential? And when you really start to help people go, is that essential or not? You'd find that a lot of people make non-essential things essential.
So we wanted to do a sermon series on this once, and I think it was called like the 7 Essentials. I think it was, and yet we couldn't agree on what those 7 things were.
Yeah.
And so I came from a church that I'm so thankful for. I'm not saying I mean, I hope this is honoring in the way that I say that. I mean, I'm truly a church that I became a Christian at. I was raised Catholic. I was at a club 21 years ago. Someone invited me to church, went hungover, trusted in Jesus, and was discipled there, and then went on staff there, and then became the pastor there. So grateful. But it was very, and it was a very like guard your doctrine carefully church. And I just kind of lived in that bubble, and I'm like, everybody agrees with us, and and if you don't, you're weird. That's kind of, I mean, subconsciously, I think I thought that. And then I moved 4.5 years ago. Our family moved here, and I'm like, oh gosh, everyone does not believe the same things. And I was thinking about that, like that. It probably leaned more Calvinist. This place probably leans a little bit more Arminian or free will, and trying to realize, like, okay, I can broaden my borders. Like, I can play nice with people. Like, if we can agree on the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ, there really is a lot that we can disagree on and still like love each other. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yeah. And I would say pull it back even more. And if someone doesn't agree on Jesus or the resurrection, how do I go about having a conversation with them? And do I begin hurling professions of faith at them, making demands, or do I lean in with curiosity and kindness and go, help me understand what it is you believe, instead of going, let me show you why what you believe is so wrong. And what happens is, at least I'm sure you've experienced this, the more you inquire and are inquisitive instead of interrogative, the quicker I found people will actually want to hear what I think as well.
My favorite book on evangelism is actually entitled Questioning Evangelism. It's rabbinic evangelism, doing evangelism like Jesus did, which is basically like he just would respond to questions with questions. And so I very much agree with what you just said. What is the criticism of the book? So like if somebody's out there, they're like, hey man, this guy, he's gone off the deep end. Like, what are they saying?
Yeah, just that I'm not dogmatic enough, or that I'm making too much, I'm making weak stands on important things.
How dogmatic should we be?
I mean, what a great question. I like to run it all through, what's the least that Jesus ever required of someone, where we get a picture of salvation. And you need to always, I think, go back to the thief on the cross and go, okay, if you build a theology that doesn't make room for that moment, then maybe you've confined it too strictly.
Yeah.
Because, I forget who said this, but imagine the thief gets up to heaven and it's like, hey, so tell me the 5 points of Calvinism. He's like, what are you talking about? Hey, when were you baptized? He's like, what are you talking about? Hey, when, and you go through these things and he goes, hey, he just said I could come. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's one of my favorites.
That's what's his name?
I know, I forget.
He has a
Nate's like, what are you talking about?
Irish accent.
Is it Alistair Begg?
Right.
Yeah.
Alistair
Oh,
Begg. Yeah, the guy in the middle cross said I could come. I wonder if there's a difference in being in the presence of Jesus, though, and being able to acknowledge him as like, hey, this guy is innocent. He didn't do anything, and it's different now in a sense that he's here in representation of humans, and I think maybe where I land and is probably right where you're at, with an asterisk of also, I think we're going to be surprised by who gets in, but we're also going to be surprised by who doesn't. And so sometimes I feel like the bar's really high, and sometimes I feel like the bar's really low. Like the prostitute on the corner, like she can step into the kingdom of God with just the acknowledgement of Romans 10:9. If you could, by confessing with her mouth that Jesus Christ is Lord and believing in her heart that God raised him from the dead, she's in. The dude on the second row of the church every single week, who's memorized much of the Bible, but who doesn't operate in the realm of faith, there may be a surprise there. That's kind of how I think about it.
And, in my book, I don't really tackle who's in and who's not, and, what are the essential categories. The book is more of an exploration of how well do I disagree? Like, how am I able to actually control my emotions when that debate starts? Or even today, somebody commented a very aggressive thing on my social media. And what are the steps that I can walk through to change from a hostile, reactive position, to a curious and kind position, even when someone's coming at me? And I think in the Christian space, one of the most essential things we need to understand is when someone's disagreeing with you, that is not a sign that something is wrong with your relationship. That's actually a sign you're in a relationship to begin with.
Yeah.
Because if everyone in your life agrees with you 100% of the time, you're actually not in a relationship with anyone but yourself. Yeah. And you've created an atmosphere where people know it's not safe to tell you what they really think. And I pull from, as a pastor, you'd appreciate, in Ephesians 4, Paul says, to build up unity in the church, right? And I always think unity is the absence of disagreement. That's true unity. But then Paul goes on to say, to build up the church into all unity, he's given apostles, prophets, shepherds, teachers, and evangelists. And I go, I've played these churches. Good luck having 5 guys like that agree on anything. And yet, making space for those differing perspectives is what gives us real unity, and not just, there's an old African proverb that says, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And a lot of our churches are the apostle and the prophet team up, or the shepherd and the teacher team
Right.
up, or the evangelist just does his own thing. And true unity is a bunch of guys who are going to disagree on all kinds of things, but learn to grab onto what really matters. You know?
We're on with Mike Donehey, spelled Donehey, or Dunhay. I'm going to get that right one of these days. From 10th Avenue North, wrote a book, Grace in the Gray, available everywhere books are sold. Why this topic? Like, did you have a journey that kind of brought you to this place? Was someone mean online? Like, how'd you get here?
You know, it actually started, and I talk about this in the book. I was very disagreeable as a kid. My family, the first Thanksgiving my wife came to with our family, I found her crying in the room. She goes, "Why are you guys all so angry at each other?" You know, I go, "We're not. We're having fun. This is the way we talk." You know, and so I come from a family of debaters and arguers, and as I got into a band, you know, that's like being married to 4 other people, and you had to start learning how to argue better and kinder. And I suppose really the beginning of writing this book happened when our band was picketed outside of an arena in, I think it was Louisiana. And there's, you know, people with signs and telling everyone how everyone's going to hell. And I remember I walked out because I go, "Oh, there's picketers. Let's go talk to them." You know, I was super stoked. And I get out there and the guy's like, "You're all going to hell and you're playing the devil's music." And I go, how do you feel like this method is working?
Yeah.
Like, how do you feel like these tactics, are you seeing a lot of people go, "Oh, I'm dressed like a whore. Oh, let me come be saved." And I walked away. We didn't make a lot. I was like, "Do you know that the John Newton Amazing Grace song, do you guys sing that in your church?" He goes, "Oh, of course." I go, "Well, you know, a lot of scholars believe that was a ripped off bar tune that later someone applied his poem to. So in a sense, you're singing secular music when you sing Amazing Grace." He's like, "That's a lie straight from the devil." So we didn't make a lot of headway, but I left the conversation and I go, "What was it about his methodology whether he was correct or not?" And a lot of folks in church, they'll say things like, "If you speak the truth, that's what matters. And it doesn't matter if someone is offended by it, because our job, the most loving thing we can do, is tell people the truth," right? And I stumbled upon this passage where Paul is coaching Timothy in 2 Timothy, and he says, "Timothy, God's servant must not be quarrelsome. He must be able to teach. He must be kind to everyone, correcting his opponents," we love that part, "with all gentleness." So, and there's a bunch of different places in Scripture we could back this up, but Paul paints this picture that it's not just what you say, but how you say it is as important as what you say. And I think a lot of folks in the Christian space have lost sight of that.
Yeah, man, that's so good.
It's good.
It's a great verse. I got a text yesterday, and it was one of these, like, you know, hey, I prayed over this before I'm sending it, and I slept on it, and I just want you to know I love you, but and then it just had a correction in there, and
then you replied to me by
yeah. You're fired. No, and I read it, and it's, you know, what happens is, like, your day's going fine, all is right in the world, and then all of a sudden you're like, peripheral vision is blurred, you focus, like you kind of start to shake a little, like just like, "Oh, I'm so mad," and I'm building my argument in my head, and I sent it to 2 people, like, just kind of like, "Hey, what hey, one was to an elder. I said, 'Hey, I want you to know this was criticism of me, just because I don't want to be criticized in a silo. Like, here's criticism of me.' And I sent it to my wife, and they both responded the exact same way. This was their response. They said, 'Yeah, you agree with them, right?'
Oh, wow.
Meaning, like, I had been critical of myself in the same way, and they were both like, yeah, that they're just saying what you already said." And I was like, yeah, but they're saying to me, and then, it's like, yeah, it's so much better than them saying to somebody else, right? And I'm like, okay, stop being right. And we talked last night, the person and I, and just starting with, hey, I just want you to know I think you're right. And I've had the exact same thought of that criticism, and the whole conversation just went a different way. But yeah, it's like we forgot how to disagree, and I don't know why people are so mean. And I think we're fighting for the same things. Like I mean, there's some really charged topics here in Waco that I think where sometimes somebody's just like, hey, will you give me space to wrestle with this? And I'm like, sure. But can I have the same privilege? Like, will you give me space to wrestle with this too? And like in as I wrestle, like this may be how I practice, but just know that I'm not power hungry. I'm not trying to grab for control. I am just wrestling with what the scripture says. And when I stand before God, I want to hear, well done, good and faithful servant. I'm responsible for leading a lot of people a common direction. And I'm just trying to do the best I can with what I have. So like, please, I know there's people that abuse power and take this and they beat people over the head with the scripture. I hope I'm not doing that. And I'm just genuinely trying to say, hey, what does the Bible say, and how do we apply that?
Yeah. And usually, like if you had voraciously responded and kind of this ferocious attack back, that says more about what's going on in you.
Yeah.
And one of the chapters I have is called Get the Fork Out of Here. And it's about if you're finding in yourself, again, the book is kind of pointed at yourself, like when someone comes with criticism or an argument and I just lash out, what I need to inspect is there any unforgiveness in my heart? Because it's been my experience that usually the people who are the angriest online or the quickest to attack, there's some kind of resentment just hanging out, and we're told that, like, don't let there be any root of bitterness. It's actually the only thing that we're told gives Satan a foothold or a stronghold, And so I have this ridiculous analogy of, I was making this smoothie one day and my daughter snuck up on me because it was early in the morning. And anyway, I was shocked. She was standing on the landing and she goes, "Daddy, can I come help you with the smoothie?" I said, "Sure." So she's like, "Can I put the spinach in?" I go, "Yeah." So we start throwing all this stuff in the blender, this health smoothie. And what I forgot was when she startled me, I had dropped a fork full of avocado into the blender. And so we're adding powder, we're adding coconut milk, we're adding chia seeds. Well, but what happens when I hit on, the 500 horsepower Vitamix blender starts shaking and smoke and sparks, and the fork actually burst out the side of the blender, which I didn't even know that was possible.
Powerful, man.
They
got like a V8.
I mean,
wow.
It starts going, and her and I are holding each other, screaming.
That's good.
And smoke is going, and all of a sudden the fork goes poof, out the side, and smoothie erupts all over the kitchen. And I was just thinking about how that's such a perfect picture to me of bitterness. How we go, gosh, I want to hear God. I want to understand his heart. I need more praise in my life. I need more worship. I need more sermons. I need this. And the whole time God's going, hey, can we get that bitterness out of your heart?
Get the fork out of here.
You're like, that doesn't matter. And when you have bitterness in there, it comes outside.
But how do you get it out of there? Because sometimes, and maybe this is because recently someone sent me an email that wasn't like, hey, I think you're the best. Like exactly what you said. It's like, I get so angry at them because it's like, all I want to do is help you. And now you're just mad at me. And now I'm mad at you. So it's like, how do I not respond angrily to someone who's seemingly just taking my intentions in the worst possible way? And it's like, man, I just want to come back at them and write them a longer email response and
with all the receipts.
Yeah, right.
I'm
exactly.
Right, you're wrong.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the gospel is the cure where it ought to make us the least offensive and the least defeated,
It's good.
Wow.
right? Because those are my two extremes. When I get called out or when someone disagrees with me, I get real defensive or I get real defeated. And Christ is our defender. So
good.
I love what you said. He's like, oh, actually, yeah, I do agree with you. And oh, I am horrible. I'm so bad Jesus had to die for me.
Man,
So,
that's so good.
It's a good response.
but I'm so loved. He was glad to die for me.
Totally.
And so the gospel kind of robs us of defensiveness and it robs us of defeatedness. And as Tim Keller used to say, it causes us to actually forget about ourselves.
It's
Which, when you're in an argument with someone else, that's the best place you can be because you can actually see them and listen to them instead of listening to how it's making you feel.
It's a genuine, like I'm actually genuinely so much worse than you think I am.
Yeah.
That's what you don't realize. Like the accusation that you bring against me, I'm way worse than that. And I think Shane Bernard talks about embracing accusations when the enemy comes and he says, "Hey, you're worthless." It's like, I know, but I've got an amazing Savior. Yesterday was such a productive day of ministry. I had a conversation with a guy last night, and he just was really struggling. And you're like peeling back the layers. And this is going to be so controversial, but I said, let me ask you a question. Do you hate Joe Biden? And he goes, "Well, I hate so much of what he stands for." I said, do you feel in tune with your emotions enough to be able to separate the statement that you hate so much of what he stands for and you hate him? Like, are you sure you don't hate him? And I said, because here's what I hear from you. I hear that you hate him so much that you are unable to love anyone that voted for him. And he was like, "Yeah, I think that's probably true." And I was like, "Man, let's go real slow in those turns."
Yeah.
Because there's some, there's some like affiliations there. I think that have pulled us so far from Christ-likeness, right? If anything is causing us, I am unable to love this person. So it was an interesting conversation, and I think you're right. Like, get the fork out of here.
That's why Jesus has, I'm sure you know this, but he had Simon the Zealot and Matthew the tax collector in his posse. Simon and the Zealots would have been murdering people like Matthew the traitor. And so he's making a statement here that this kingdom is way outside politic lines. And I want to give you a real quick parable just to follow up this forgiveness thing is, who do you not want to be there when you get to heaven? Like, let's say you die, it's just like you always read, and you're standing in front of the pearly gates, and Peter's on his pedestal, and you look at him because he's got the book of life, and you're like, "Peter?" And he looks down at you like, you're like, "Yes." And he reads your book, gates start opening, the light of Jesus' face, golden street starts blinding you, you start stumbling forward into unparalleled joy forever, and then a shadowy figure starts coming out of the gates towards you. And you pause because you're confused. Who is this? And then your confusion turns into shock and horror because as they come into focus, it's that one person that should not be there, that you do not want there because of what they did to you, what they stood for. And they start apologizing to you. But you put your fingers in your ears and you brush past me like, maybe in a couple thousand years. And then the gates close in your face. And you turn around and you go, whoa, what's going on? And Peter goes, "Oh, I forgot to tell you that, heaven is unbroken, perfect community with God and each other. So you have to go in pairs." And I think there's a ton of people who would say, "I want to go to heaven as long as they're not there."
Yeah.
And if there's anybody you don't want to be in heaven, like, that is not in line with the gospel belief.
Yeah, I thought you were going to say, I forgot to tell you, unless you forgive others, only then can you be forgiven. Because it's like, it's crazy how many times it says that.
Totally.
Yeah.
And we're like, yeah, but surely that's not what that means, And I'm like, I don't know. It's repeat, even in the Lord's Prayer, forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. That's good, man. Great. The Grace in the Gray is the book. We're with Mike Donehey. Pick up the book everywhere books are sold. Anything spinning in y'all's head?
I mean, I just think the world would be so much worse if we argued less. It's like things are just getting more and more fun. We're angry at each other. We argue more. There's mean comments. It's like, who doesn't want that?
Yeah.
Sounds like a great world to live in.
Are you a pacifist, Mike?
I would align myself with pacifism. Yes.
Always been, or is that like a
No, my best friend runs these like military rite of passage things, and so we have lots of generous debate over the topic.
yeah.
That's good.
So
Well,
I
I just wanted to say, like, I really love this subject, and I'm kind of similar to you. Grew up just debating, challenging, and then got thrown into a crazy situation on reality TV where a lot of people were commenting mean things on my, Instagram and social media, and a lot of people had opinions about my faiths, my beliefs, my convictions, everything about me. So I think this topic is so needed. I think there's a lot of people that don't know how to conflict well and don't know how to, like you said, debate well and in the godly way. And so I think a lot of people shy from conflict, where I think that honestly, criticism and conflict done in a healthy way, in a godly way, actually can be so beneficial. And so I know for me, like a lot of my friends used to say, like, Maddie's the confrontational one, like even at a restaurant, if something was wrong with the food, they'd be like, Maddie, will you tell the waiter, and they always made me be the one. But I think that when you come to someone in love for their betterment and say, hey, like, this is something I've seen in your life, kind of like the person that reached out to you, and I'm doing it so that you can grow and become more like Christ. You're actually doing that person a service. And so I guess my question would be, like, what would be, just some practical steps or advice that you could give the listeners of how they can either confront someone or respond, to conflict or confrontation in the best possible way?
Yeah, I love what you're saying. The subtitle of my book is A More Loving Way to Disagree.
Yeah.
It's not Grace in the Gray, How to Remove Disagreement from Your Life. Because someone who isn't willing to confront when things are bad or unjust, they're not good. Like some of us hide behind this mask, like, I'm this really kind person, when really you just lack the courage to stand up to people who are doing wrong things. So there's a big difference. And I think the difference is, how do we remove like you were saying, the anger and the hatred in our heart when we're attacked? And for me, a really practical way to do this, especially online, like you were talking about, and this was a big impetus for the book, is I had posted something about something that would be controversial in Christian circles, and I got all these crazy, comments, and I started learning to just go, man, it sounds like you had a really intense response to this. Could you tell me more about that? And then quickly you can feel out who just wants to fight and who actually wants to dialogue. And I would just make this habit of question, write another question. Man, that's crazy. Like, I had this one lady who was going off because I had posted something about Novak Djokovic not being able to play in the Australian Open because of his vaccination status. And I didn't even make a comment about what I thought about it, but she just started tearing my head off. I said, hey, it sounds like you're really, upset about this vaccine thing. Can you tell me what's going on? And boom, 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 couple interactions later, it basically sounds like she is crying because she's a teacher and she has all this compassion over these kids. Well, I got to then pray for her.
Wow.
So it went from what usually would have just gone off the rails, everyone's angry, to going, what's actually behind some of that? And let's
Like,
talk
not
about
taking it personally.
Yeah. Are you friends with
it. Well, that's the key. Yeah.
Are you friends with Carlos Whitaker?
I am friends
I feel
with
like
Carlos.
That would be besties. I'm getting Carlos vibes.
Yeah, we talked about our books should have been in a package deal because a lot of the same kind of thoughts we're having.
What do you do with or like respond to this quote that you probably have heard before? The only thing necessary for evil to prevail is for good people to do nothing.
Right. So I totally agree with it. And I was listening to a sermon about the power of forgiveness. And a lot of people wrongly think if you forgive, then there's no justice. And the point the pastor was making is like, no. Until you forgive, you will only be an agent of vengeance instead of an ambassador of justice. And so when I remove all the hatred and bitterness in my heart, now I can actually rightfully subdue and stop evil, as opposed to acting out vengeance. Like if a woman's being beaten by her husband, the cops should get called. Yeah. If that woman never forgives her husband, then she'll want him to fry in the electric chair. She will have hatred and anger in her heart. If she can actually forgive him, now we can actually work on pursuing justice for him, you know?
Yeah, it's good, brother. That's good. I'm encouraged. Did you write a song for the book that goes along with
jingle?
You got a jingle or anything? You have a guitar handy?
You know, I've written quite a few songs that are in line with the themes of this song for sure, or this book. One song, you know, I did write a song about forgiveness. I'll sing a little bit of it.
Pulls out his guitar.
There it is.
Well, I was just in a songwriting session right before this.
He's like, I was waiting for this moment.
So I was asking my dad, I put this in the book about bitterness and forgiveness. My dad was abused by his dad. And one day I said, Dad, how come you never hit me? Like, and you never raged in an alcoholic stupor, because his dad was an alcoholic and did all this stuff. And he goes, oh, I just became a Christian, and I was in a church service, and the pastor said, if you don't forgive others, Jesus won't forgive you. And I realized that I needed to forgive my dad. So I wrote him a letter. I go, oh, you wrote him a letter? Like, Dad, I forgive you for all you did to me. And he goes, no, I wrote him a letter asking him to forgive me for all the bitterness I had in my heart toward him. And I said, Dad, what did he say when he got the letter? He goes, I don't know. I go, what do you mean you don't know? He goes, I don't even know if he got it. I just know that once I put that letter in the mail, suddenly I was free.
Good.
Gosh.
And for those struggling with forgiveness, I want to say a lot of time it doesn't happen like that. But reconciliation is the ministry we've been given. And it must be not winning debates. Winning debates is not the ministry we've been given. Amassing governmental power is not the ministry we've been given. The ministry we've been given is reconciliation. And that means that needs to be the direction we're aiming our ship toward at all costs. So I'll play a little bit of this. It goes, I've been waking up a victim of my life too long. I've been waiting for the world to apologize for their wrong. Now I'm looking in the mirror and I'm seeing it clearer. I'm the guilty one, somehow forgiven. Suddenly I'm healed, suddenly I'm free. I was blind, but now suddenly I see. I was the prisoner, a hostage to all my hurt, yeah. But now I can run, now I can breathe. I'm feeling the weight of you forgiving me. I lay down the blame, I fall into grace. Watch everything change suddenly, yeah, yeah, yeah. Watch everything change suddenly.
Let's go.
Woo!
I feel like you got a future, man.
I mean, my goodness. I was
feel
just
like
at
you
a
can do
private
that.
concert.
Let's go.
I just keep doing it.
So,
I'm gonna
hey,
keep
is
doing
that
it. Yeah, I'm not.
is that song on Spotify or anything, or did that just happen? Like,
No, that's one I just wrote. A couple.
man, you're
like
a
2
freak.
months.
That's
What?
crazy.
That's
So I mean, I'm a songwriter. What
That's
can I say?
I love that. And so, Mike, are you still? And forgive me for not knowing, because my wife and I we don't even listen to the radio. But are you still with 10th Avenue North? Are you on your own, or how's that going?
Yeah, both. Okay. So I've been putting out solo records, and it's a little fresh news, but we're bringing 10th Avenue North back next
Let's
year.
go!
So how
You heard it here first on the Becoming Something podcast. That just happened.
Oh my
Guys,
gosh.
I don't think I was supposed to say
Go
that.
on Spotify. Go on Apple Music. Listen to Mike Donehey, spelled Donehey.
Done. Hey,
You
and y'all are
can't-
coming
yeah.
to Harris Creek,
yeah.
right?
how long have y'all been like paused for?
Yeah. I mean, since 2020, since the world shut down.
Wow.
But they're coming back. Get the
Man.
music.
We're doing the Mercy Me cruise in January.
Oh,
Dude.
that.
And that
I
Those are
mean,
the
that
best.
is my dream come
Those
true.
are the best, man.
Mercy Me and 10th Avenue North. That's like what I grew up on.
Those are
So,
the best.
not to make you sound old, but
Scott Brickle was on the podcast not long ago, but yeah, those are the best. Hey, we love you, man. That was you're
good.
a friend of the show now. It's official. Grab the book, Grace in the Gray with Mike Donehey. Listen, go to Spotify, listen to his music. I think it's one of the first songs I think maybe there was one other.
I've sang a couple times.
Yeah,
but,
that's true. That's true. And we're sorry for that, listeners. Mike,
that was the debut. That was the debut of the song.
I love that.
So
Man, thanks so
awesome.
much for being on with us.
Yeah.
thanks so much for having me, guys. Appreciate it.
Thanks for tuning in to Becoming Something, where we promise to keep the conversation honest and real for young adults in their 20s and 30s. Every moment we live is training for a future moment, and that's why we do this podcast, because we want you to be prepared for everything that life is going to throw at you. Our hope with this podcast is that it would help you become all that God desires you to be. To find out more, visit becomingsomething.com.